Oh, new stream. I noticed last time it looked like there was, which is nice. Always nice to have new. So let's got too much going on. I guess it doesn't matter how many viewers I have. I just would like to be able to see if somebody's commenting. So considering that I'm not able to record, this is going to be. Something die on me here just now. Oh, that's okay. Whatever. It's unimportant. Let's see. What time are we on the stream? 1:50. So we're gonna do. That's what I knew there was a reason I was trying to set that up. Put that. And then I wanted to, instead of. I thought you used to be able to hit the middle mouse button and then you'd be able to scroll. I wanted to make this scroll smoother. All right. 2:24. I'm actually starting. What am I doing? 18 minutes plus 10 minutes of discussion. I'm just prepping myself. Having alluded to the subject of reversion, I may here refer to a statement often made by naturalists, namely that our domestic varieties, when run wild, gradually but certainly revert in character to their aboriginal stock. Hence, it has been argued that no deductions can be drawn from domestic races to species in a state of nature. I have in vain endeavored to discover on what decisive facts the above statement has so often and so boldly been made. There would be great difficulty in proving its truth. We may safely conclude that very many of the most strongly marked domestic varieties could not possibly live in a wild state. In many cases, we do not know what the aboriginal stock was, and so could not tell whether or not nearly perfect reversion had ensued. It would be quite necessary, in order to prevent the effects of intercrossing, that only a single variety should be turned loose in its new home. Nevertheless, as the varieties certainly do occasionally revert in some of their characters to ancestral forms, it seems to me not improbable that if we could succeed in naturalizing, or were to cultivate during many generations, the several races, for instance, of the cabbage in very poor soil, in which case, however, some effect would have to be attributed to the direct action of the poor soil, that they would, to a large extent, or even wholly, revert to the wild aboriginal stock. Whether or not the experiment would succeed is not of great importance for our line of argument, for by the experiment itself the conditions of life are changed. If it could be shown that our domestic varieties manifested a strong tendency to reversion, that is, to lose their acquired characteristics, whilst kept under the same conditions and whilst kept in considerable body, so that freely intercrossing might check, by blending together, any slight deviations in their structure. In such case, I grant that we could deduce nothing from domestic varieties in regards to species, but there is not a shadow of evidence in favor of this view. To assert that we could not breed our cart and racehorses, long and short-haired horned cattle, and poultry of various breeds, and excellent vegetables, for an almost infinite number of generations would be opposed to all experience. I may add that when under nature the conditions of life do change, variations and reversions of character probably do occur. But natural selection, as will hereafter be explained, will determine how far the new character thus arising shall be preserved. When we look to the hereditary varieties or races of our domestic animals and plants, and compare them with closely allied species, we generally perceive in every domestic race, as already remarked, less uniformity of character than in true species. Domestic races of that same species also often have a somewhat monstrous character. By which I mean that, although differing from each other and from other species of the same genus in several trifling respects, they often differ in an extreme degree in some one part, both when compared one with another, and more especially when compared with all the species to which they are nearly allied, with these exceptions, and with that of the perfect fertility of varieties when crossed, a subject hereafter to be discussed. Domestic races of the same species differ from each other in the same manner as, only in most cases in a lesser degree than do closely allied species of the same genus in the state of nature. I think this must be admitted when we find that there are hardly any domestic races, either amongst animals or plants, which have not been ranked by competent judges as mere varieties, and by other competent judges as descendants of aboriginally distinct species. If any marked distinction existed between domestic races and species, this source of doubt could not so perpetually recur. It has often been stated that domestic races do not differ from each other in characters of generic value. I think it could be shown that this statement is hardly correct, but naturalists differ widely in determining what characters are of generic value. All such valuations being at present empirical. Moreover, on the view of the origin of genre, which I shall presently give, we have no right to expect often to meet with generic differences in our domestic production. When we attempt to estimate the amount of structural difference between the domestic races of the same species, we are soon involved in doubt from not knowing whether they have descended from one or several parent species. This point, if it could be cleared up, would be interesting. If, for instance, it could be shown that the greyhound, bloodhound, terrier, spaniel, and bulldog, which we all know propagate their kind so truly, were the offspring of any single species. Then such facts would have great weight in making us doubt about the immutability of the many very closely allied natural species. For instance, of the many foxes inhabiting different quarters of the world, I do not believe, as we shall presently see, that the whole amount of difference between the several breeds of the dog has been produced under domestication. I believe that some part of the difference is due to their being descended from distinct species. In the case of some other domesticated species, there is presumptive or even strong evidence that all the breeds have descended from a single wild stock. It has often been assumed that man has chosen for domestication. Animals and plants have an extraordinary inherent tendency to vary, and likewise to withstand diverse climates. I do not dispute that these capacities have added largely to the value of most of our domesticated productions. But how could a savage possibly know, when he first tamed an animal, whether it would vary in succeeding generations, and whether it would endure other climates? Has the little variability of the ass or guinea fowl, or the small power of endurance of warmth by the reindeer, or of cold by the common camel, prevented their domestication? I cannot doubt that if other animals and plants equal in number to our domesticated production, and belonging to equally diverse classes and countries, were taken from a state of nature, and could be made to breed for an equal number of generations under domestication, they would vary on an average as largely as the parent species of our existing domesticated productions have varied. In the case of most of our anciently domesticated animals and plants, I do not think it is possible to come to any definite conclusion whether they have descended from one or several wild species. The argument mainly relied on by those who believed in the multiple origin of our domestic animals is that we find in the most ancient records, more especially on the monuments of Egypt, such diversity in the breeds, and that some of the breeds closely resemble, perhaps are identical with, those still existing. Even if this latter fact were found more strictly and generally true than seems to me the case, what does it show? But that some of our breeds originated 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. But Mr. Horner's researchers have rendered it in some degree probable that man sufficiently civilized to have manufactured pottery existed in the valley of the Nile 13 or 14,000 years ago, and who will pretend to say that how long before these ancient period savages, like those of Tierra del Fuego or Australia, who possess a semi-domestic dog, may not have existed in the whole subject must, I think, remain vague. Nevertheless, I may, without here entering on any detail, state that, from geographical and other considerations, I think it highly probable that our domestic dogs have descended from several wild species. Knowing as we do that savages are very fond of taming animals, it seems to me unlikely in the case of the dog genus, which is distributed in a wild state throughout the world, that since man first appeared, one single species alone should have been domesticated. In regard to sheep and goats, I can form no opinion. I should think, from facts communicated to me by Mr. Blyth on the habits, voice, and constitution, etc., of the humped Indian cattle, that these have descended from a different aboriginal stock than our European cattle. And several competent judges believe that these latter have had more than one wild parent. With respect to horses, for a reason which I cannot give here, I am doubtfully inclined to believe, in opposition to several authors, that all the races have descended from one wild stock. Mr. Blyth, whose opinion from his large and varied sources of knowledge I should value more than that of almost anyone, thinks that all of the breeds of poultry have proceeded from the common wild Indian fowl, Gallus bankiva. In regard to ducks and rabbits, the breeds of which differ considerably from each other in structure, I do not doubt that they have all descended from the common wild duck and rabbit. The doctrine of the origin of our several domestic races from several aboriginal stocks has been carried on to an absurd extreme by some authors. They believe that every race which breeds true, let the distinctive characters be ever so slight, has had in its wild prototype. At this rate, there must have existed at least a score of species of wild cattle, as many sheep, and several goats in Europe alone, and several even within Great Britain. One author believes that there formerly existed in Great Britain 11 wild species of sheep peculiar to it. When we bear in mind that Britain has now hardly one peculiar mammal, in France but few distinct from those of Germany, and conversely, and so with Hungary, Spain, etc., but that each of these kingdoms possesses several peculiar breeds of cattle, sheep, etc., we must admit that many domestic breeds have originated in Europe, for whence could they have been derived? As these several countries do not possess a number of peculiar species as distinct parent stocks. So it is in India. Even in the case of the domestic dogs of the whole world, which I fully admit have probably descended from several wild species, I cannot doubt that there has been an immense amount of inherited variation. Who can believe that animals closely resembling the Italian greyhound and the bloodhound, the bulldog, the Blenheim spaniel, etc., so unlike all wild Canidae, have ever existed freely but in the state of nature? It has often been loosely said that all our races of dogs have been produced by the crossing of few aboriginal species. But by crossing, we can only get forms in some degree intermediate between their parents. And if we account for our several domestic races by this process, we must admit the former existence of the most extreme forms, as the Italian greyhound, bloodhound, bulldog, etc. In the wild state, moreover, the possibility of making distinct races by crossing has been greatly exaggerated. There can be no doubt that a race may be modified by occasional crosses, if aided by the careful selection of those individual mongrels which present any desired character, but that a race could be obtained nearly intermediate between two extremely different races or species, I can hardly believe. Sir J. Sabrit expressly experimentized for this object, and failed. The offspring from the first cross between two pure breeds is tolerably, and sometimes, as I have found with pigeons, extremely uniform, and everything seems simple enough. But when these mongrels are crossed one with another for several generations, hardly two of them will be alike, and then the extreme difficulty, or rather utter hopelessness, of the task becomes apparent. Certainly, a breed intermediate between two very distinct breeds could not be got without extreme care and long continued selection. Nor can I find a single case on record of a permanent race having been thus formed. On the breeds of the domestic pigeon, believing that it's always best to study some special group, I have, after deliberation, taken up domestic pigeons. I have kept every breed which I could purchase or obtain, and have most kindly favored with and have been most kindly favored with the skins from several quarters of the world, more especially by the Honorable W. Eliot from India, and the Honorable C. Murray from Persia. Many treatises in different languages have been published on pigeons, and some of them are very important, as being of considerable antiquity. I've associated with several eminent fanciers, and have been permitted to join two of the London pigeon clubs. The diversity of the breeds is something astonishing. Compare the English terrier and the short-faced tumbler, and see the wonderful differences in their beak, entailing corresponding differences in their skulls. The carrier, more especially the male bird, is also remarkable from the wonderful development of the carunculated skin about the head, and this is accompanied by greatly elongated eyelids, very large internal orifices to the nostrils, and a wide gape of mouth. The short-faced tumbler has a beak in outline almost like that of a fin, and the common tumbler has the singular inherited habit of flying at a great height in a compact flock, and tumbling in the air head over heels. The runt is a bird of great size, with long, massive beak and large. Some of the sub-breeds of runts have very long necks, others very long wings and tails, others singularly short tails. The barb is allied to the carrier, but instead of a very long beak, has a very short and broad one. The pouter has much elongated body, wings, and legs, and its enormously developed crop, which it glories in inflating, may well excite astonishment and even laughter. The turbot has a very short and conical beak, with a line of reversed feathers down the breast, and it has the habit of continually expanding slightly the upper part of the esophagus. The Jacobin has the feathers so much reversed along the back of the neck that they form a hood, and it has, proportionally to its size, much elongated wing and tail feathers. The trumpeter and laughter, as their names express, utter a very different coo from the other breeds. The fantail has 30 or even 40 tail feathers, instead of 12 or 14, the normal number in all members of the great pigeon family, and these feathers are kept expanded and are carried so erect that in good birds the head and tail touch. The oil gland is quite aborted. Several other less distinct breeds might be specified. In the skeletons of several breeds, the development of the bones of the face and the length and breadth and curvature differs enormously. The shape, as well as the breadth and length of the ramus of the lower jaw, varies in a highly remarkable manner. The number of the caudal and sacral vertebrae vary, as does the number of the ribs, together with their relative breadth and the presence of the processes. The size and shape of the apertures and the sternum are highly variable. So is the degree of divergence in relative size of the two arms of the furcula, proportional width of the gape of mouth, the proportional length of the eyelids, of the orifice of the nostrils, of the tongue, not always in strict correlation with the length of the beak, the size of the crop and of the upper part of the esophagus, the development and abortion of the oil gland, the number of the primary wing and caudal feathers, the relative length of wing and tail to each other and to the body, the relative length of leg and of the feet, the number of scutellae on the toes, the development of skin between the toes. All points of structure which are variable. The period at which the perfect plumage is acquired varies, as does the state of the down with which the nesting birds are clothed when hatched. The shape and size of the eggs vary. The manner of flight differs remarkably, as does, in some breeds, the voice and disposition. Lastly, in certain breeds, the males and females have come to differ to a slight degree from altogether. At least a score of pigeons might be chosen, which, if shown to an ornithologist, and he were told that they were wild birds, would certainly, I think, be ranked by him as well-defined species. Moreover, I do not believe that any ornithologist would place the English terrier, the short-faced tumbler, the runt, the bob, pouter, and fantail in the same genus, more especially as in each of these breeds several truly inherited sub-breeds or species, as he might have called them, could be shown him. Great as the differences are between the breeds of pigeons, I am fully convinced that the common opinion of naturalists is correct, namely that all have descended from the rock pigeon, Columba livia, including under this term several geographical races or subspecies which differ from each other in the most trifling respects, as several of the reasons which have led me to this belief are in some degree applicable in other cases. I will here briefly give them. If the several breeds are not varieties, and not proceeded from the rock pigeon, they must have descended from at least 7 or 8 aboriginal stocks, for it is impossible to make the present domestic breeds by the crossing of any lesser number. How, for instance, could a pouter be produced by crossing 2 breeds unless one of the parent stocks possessed the characteristic enormous crop? The supposed aboriginal stocks must all have been rock pigeons, that is, not breeding or willingly perching on trees. But besides C. livia, this geographical subspecies, I think I might be going over, but whatever. Only 2 or 3 other species of rock pigeon are known, and these have not any of the characters of the domestic breeds. Hence, the supposedly aboriginal stocks must either still exist in countries where they were originally domesticated, and yet be unknown to ornithologists, and this, considering their size, habit, and remarkable characters, seems very improbable. Or they must have become extinct in the wild state, but birds breeding on precipices and good flyers are unlikely to be exterminated, and the common rock pigeon, which has the same habits with the domestic breeds, has not been exterminated on several of the smaller British islets, or on the shores of the Mediterranean. Hence, the supposed extermination of so many species having similar habits with the rock pigeon seems to be a very rash assumption. Moreover, the several above-named domesticated breeds have been transported to all parts of the world, and therefore some of them must have been carried back again into their native country. But not one has ever become wild or feral, though the dovecot pigeon, which is the rock pigeon in a very slightly altered state, has become feral in several places. Again, all recent experience shows that it is most difficult to get any wild animal to breed freely under domestication. Yet, on the hypothesis of multiple origins of large pigeons, it must be assumed that at least 7 or 8 species were so thoroughly domesticated in ancient times by half-civilized man as to be quite prolific under confinement. Wait, 23:30. Let's add 10 minutes of discussion to this. Okay, let me think. I'm just slightly distracted by something. Oh yeah, I need to go. I'm recording the keystroke set. So, since this isn't working here, I'm going to do this and hope that this works. It's better to do it now than to put it off, because then I'll find out for next time. So, still on the same topic. I should say. The topic being what the evolution of ancient wisdom. Oh yeah, we're covering this from the evolution of ancient wisdom. Darwin goes into scientific levels of detail describing the varieties of domestic pigeons, and he preambles this with suggesting there may have been several different wild varieties that came, and that it is the effect of, I guess I better stay somewhat on camera. It is the, does he go into detail here about what caused the variety? Selective breeding. We haven't gotten to that part yet, I don't believe. But as I guess we could look at the different, if we're going to compare this and say ancient wisdom, and say ancient wisdom and knowledge has been under the same pressure, you could easily look at corporate structures. They might all deviate from the same set of, an incorporated business usually has a board of investors, and they all get a vote. And the vote, the way they have meetings usually follows a certain set of parliamentary order, or you would call it Robert's Rules of Order is probably the best document on that, that's kind of taken the effort to write down the rules in a concise manner. So you compare the different business structures. How about that? You have variations. You have a CEO, you have your CFO, and all of the levels, and you have the different similarities. I worked for a company. The equivalent. I've been a foreman. I've been a. I mean, you have your drivers. You have like the structure of a business is you have your regular employees at the bottom. Above them, sometimes you'll have a foreman. Sometimes you'll have a supervisor and a foreman above them. Sometimes you'll just have supervisors and there's a foreman. Sometimes you'll have the foreman, general foreman. You might have a assist. You'll have management, assistant managers, manager. For us, my first job, I was the crew chief. Crew chief, I think I like that one myself, and I would put it below foreman if I were to make. But maybe supervisor would be in charge, would be a supervisor would be a special class of crew. That's how I would structure it. But the same structures exist, but have the different variations in the simple linguistics. Or in the trade, there's an example. Baseboard in carpentry, you call it baseboard. In tile setting, you call it and you call it cutting in painting when you're going up to your line. There's the different linguistic usage and different trades is a very good example of the different varieties of our domesticated orders. And natural order, in Robert's Rules of Order, there's a concept of seconding an order. So you propose something, and somebody else has to second. If somebody else seconds the order, the proposal, that would then the group discusses that, and then they decide on that. After the discussion, they vote on it. And there's more rules, of course, and that's a topic for another time. But the natural, wild version of this is just human nature. In nature, when you are with a group of people and you want to do something, somebody takes the lead to go somewhere. So you have the same group of people, you start the night at somebody's house, you pre-game, you have a plan, and you don't leave till somebody decides to go. Somebody may want to go, start expressing desire, but you need a second person to go, and then the group follows. It's a very intuitive thing, and I thought it was fascinating when I read Robert's Rules of Order, because he just reminded me of so many times where all it takes is that second person. You can lead the group. Yes, you can try it. If there's two of you, two people leading the group, that person usually will second the first person, and you've got a de facto authority. That's a de facto authority. But once the group gets big enough at the bar or wherever, then it could split. Yes, but usually you gain members, and you maybe split at the end of the night. But if you're going to continue the party, okay, we're going to the other bar. We're going to a different spot. Then it takes one person, and that person doesn't have to be the original authority. That the original person, maybe if they're the driver, they have like the in Robert's Rules of Order, the equivalent. in Robert's Rules of Order, the equivalent would be the chair, the person who's managing the orders and rules, and that they just kind of manage the order of things to keep things orderly. And that's usually extremely formal when you get to that point. In a natural environment, the natural setting, that would be the driver would be the chair. You have to at least let the chair know or ask, we'll pay gas, or make sure he's still part of the group, or she, make sure that person is still going to be committed to whatever trouble the group is committed to getting into. And you usually approach the chair once you have a second, which is different from Robert's Rule of Order, where everyone's together and it's an organized meeting, so it's intentional. But whereas you have a more loosely spread out group at a bar, maybe go to another bar, maybe you flag down, you talk about it maybe because you're with somebody, and then you decide to go to the other bar. You let everyone know you're going to the other bar. Everyone pays. You need that second person. The first person can't just leave. If your first person is leaving, and then maybe this is a natural part of it to keep it in order. If you are leaving by yourself, you are leaving yourself. If you and somebody else, then usually it's the whole group that follows. And that could be a courtesy thing. There could be tons of subconscious signaling to that. It just seems, that's just what I've observed with groups of people when they are working or organized together in a very natural, informal manner, or even in a workplace where you have several different types of work and there's everyone knows their job, but you need to get together for certain things. They work around each other, second it, kind of informally ask somebody if they can move. Maybe you have two groups of workers and one's in the way of the other. Well, first you discuss with one, and then if they second that, yes, we can do that, then they start working around each other and they just communicate. That's the natural versus the domestic version. And the more domestic version is the organized written structure version of your rules. I've heard the Masons have their own book of rules, and so do so I'm not sure about other groups, but I'll be certain. I know at least corporations and all these do, simply because that's stated. At least some of them do. When you're big corporations, especially your business, you have in a natural state. You say, yeah, you do whatever you want. You can quit whenever you want. You have a right to do that. In a formal state, they tried for a long time to enforce it 2 weeks notice, but in a formal state, at the very least, you have your set of rules, your corporate guidelines you follow. These are the rules. This is what you do. This is how you ask for time off. In an informal, smaller business, say, a natural variety versus a domesticated variety, a less corporate environment. And you can see the corporate, the colors come out piebald, just like when you domesticate wild animals. The wild variety, rugged and diverse. The trucks aren't uniform. It's very different. Okay, I've gone too on that by 30 seconds. Exactly, if I hit this at the right time. Angle 1. I'll get better at sticking to the time. Next topic, let's see, do I have any viewers? I can't tell because I used to have 2 computers. I'm now tempted to see if I can get a junker, fix it or something, because the corruption of a dialogue considering oratory, the causes of corrupt eloquence. Is that what this one is? Yes, I believe it is. Let's see, time 34:45. 52:45 is when I need to quit. I am not surprised, returned Aper. At the stroke of a raillery, it is not enough for Messala. The oratory of ancient times engrosses all his admiration. He must have his fling at the moderns. Our talents and our studies are sure to feel the sallies of his pleasantry. I have often heard you, my friend Messala, in the same humor, according to you. The present age is not a singular or has not a single orator to boast of, though your own eloquence and that of your brother are sufficient to refute the charge. But you assert roundly and maintain your proposition with an air of confidence. You know how high you stand, and while in your general censure of the age you include yourself, the smallest tincture of malignity cannot be supposed to mingle in a decision which denies to your own genius what by common consent is allowed to be your undoubted right. I have as yet replied, Messala, see no reason to make me retract my opinion, nor do I believe that my two friends here, or even you yourself, though you sometimes affect a different tone, can seriously maintain the opposite doctrine. The decline of eloquence is too apparent. The causes which have contributed to it merit a serious inquiry. I shall be obliged to you, my friends, for a fair solution of the question. I have often reflected upon the subject, but what seems to others a full answer, with me serves only to increase the difficulty. What has happened at Rome? I perceive to have been the case in Greece. I added a question mark, my apologies. The modern orders of that country, such as the priest, Nicias, and others who, like him, stunned the school of Mytilene and Ephesus, have fallen to a greater distance from Aeschines and Demosthenes than Afer and Africanus, or you, my friends, from Tully or Asinius. You have started an important question, said Secundus, and who so able to discuss it as yourself? Your talents are equal to the difficulty. Your acquisitions in literature are known to be extensive, and you have considered the subject. I have no objection, replied Messala. My ideas are at your service, upon condition that, as I go on, you will assist me with the lights of... For two of us, I can venture to answer, said Maternus. Whatever you omit, or rather, what you leave for us to glean after you, we shall be ready to add to your observation. As to our friend Aper, you have told us that he is apt to differ from you upon this point, and even now I see him preparing to give battle. He will not tamely bear to see us joined in a league in favor of antiquity. Certainly not, replied Aper. Shall the present age, unheard and undefended, be degraded by a conspiracy? But before you sound to arms, I wish to know who are to be reckoned among the ancients. At what point of time do you fix your favorite era? When you talk to me of antiquity, I carry my view to the first ages of the world and see before me Elysius and Nestor, who flourished little less than 1,300 years ago. Your retrospect, it seems, goes no further back than to Demosthenes and Hyperides, men who have lived in the times of Philip and Alexander, and indeed survived them both. The interval between Demosthenes and the present age is little more than 400 years, a space of time which, with a view to the duration of human life, may be called long, but as a portion of that immense tract of time which includes the different ages of the world, it shrinks into nothing and seems to be but yesterday. For if it is true, as Cicero says in his treatise called Hortensius, that the great and genuine heart is that the period in which the heavenly bodies revolve to the station from which their source began, and if this grand rotation of the whole planetary system requires no less than 12,954 years of our computation, it follows that Demosthenes, your boasted ancient, becomes a modern, and even our contemporary. Nay, that he lived in the same year with ourselves, I had almost said in the same month. But I am in haste to pass to our Roman orators. Menenius Agrippa may fairly be deemed an ancient. I take it, however, that he is not the person whom you mean to oppose to professors of modern eloquence. The era which you have in view is that of Cicero and Caesar and Callias, and Caldius, of Brutus, Asinus, and Messala. Those are the men whom you place in front of our line, but for what reasons they are to be classified with the ancients, and not, as I think they ought to be, with the moderns. I am still to learn. To begin with Cicero. He, according to the account of Tiro, his freedman was put to death on the 7th of the Ides of December, during the consulship of Hirtius and Pansa, who, we know, were both cut off in the course of the year, and left their office vacant for Augustus and Quintus Pedius. Count them that 56 years to complete the reign of Augustus, 23 for that of Tiberius, 4 for Caligula, 28 for Claudius and Nero, 1 for Galba also, and Vitellius, and finally 6 from the accession of Vespasian to the present year of our felicity. We shall have from the death of Cicero a period of about 120 years, which may be considered as the term allotted to the life of man. I myself remember to have seen in Britain a soldier far advanced in years who averted that he carried arms in the very battle in which his countrymen sought to drive Julius Caesar back from their coast. If this veteran, who served in the defense of his country against Caesar's invasion, had been brought a prisoner to Rome, or if his own inclination or any other accident in the course of things had conducted him thither, he might have heard not only Caesar and Cicero, but even ourselves in some of our public speeches. In the late public largesse, you will acknowledge that you saw several old men who assured us that they had received more than once the like distribution from Augustus himself. If that be so, might not those persons have heard Corvinus and Asinius? Corvinus, we all know, lived through half the reign of Augustus, and Asinius almost to the end. How then are we to ascertain the just boundaries of a century? They are not to be varied at pleasure, so as to place some orators in a remote and others in a recent period. While people are still living, who heard them all, and may, therefore, be good reason rank them as contemporaries. From what I have said, I assume it is a clear position that the glory, whatever it be, that accrued to the age in which those orators lived is not confined to that particular period, but reaches down to the present time, may more properly be said to belong to us than to Servius Galba or to Carbo, and others of the same and more ancient date. Of that whole race of orators, I may freely say that in their manner cannot now be relished. Their language is coarse, and their composition rough, uncouth, and harsh. And yet your Calvus, your Caelius, and even your favorite Cicero condense to follow that inelegant style. It were to be wished that they had not brought such models worthy of imitation. I mean to speak my mind with freedom. But before I proceed, it will be necessary to make a preliminary observation, and it is this. Eloquence has no settled form. At different times it puts on a new garb and changes with the manners and the taste of the age. Thus we find that Garcias, compared with the elder Cato, is full and copious, but in his turn yields to Crassus, an orator more polished, more correct, and florid. Cicero rises superior to both, more animated, more harmonious and sublime. He is followed by Corvinus, who has all the softer graces, a sweet flexibility in his style, and a curious felicity in the choice of his words. Which was the great orator is not the question. The use I make of these examples is to prove that eloquence does not always wear the same dress, but even among your celebrated ancients has its different modes of expression. And it be remembered that what differs is not always the worst, yet such is the malignity of the human mind, that what has the sanction of antiquity is always admired. What is present is sure to be condemned. Can we doubt that there have been critics who were better pleased with Appius Catus than with Cicero? Cicero had his adversaries. It was objected to him that his style was redundant, turgid, never compressed, void of precision, and destitute of Attic elegance. We all have read the letters of Calvus and Brutus to your famous orator. In the course of that correspondence, we plainly see what was Cicero's opinion of those eminent men. The former appeared to him cold and languid, the latter disjointed and loose, and negligent. On the other hand, we know what they thought in return. Calvus did not hesitate to say that Cicero was diffuse, luxuriant, to a fault, and florid with vigor. Brutus, in express terms, he was weakened into length, and wanted sinew. If you ask my opinion, each of them had reason on his side. I shall hereafter examine them separately. My business at present is not in the detail. I speak of them in general terms. The era of ancient oratory is, I think, extended by its admirers no further back than the time of Cassius Severus. He, they tell us, was the first who dared to deviate from the plain and simple style of his predecessors. I admit the fact. He departed from the established forms, not through want of genius or of learning, but guided by his own good sense and superior judgment. He saw that the public ear was formed to a new manner and eloquence. He knew was to find new approaches to the heart. In the early periods of the Commonwealth, a rough, unpolished people might well be satisfied with the tedious length of unskillful speech. At a time when to make a harangue that took up the whole day was the orator's highest praise, the prolific exordium, wasting itself in feeble preparation, the circumstantial narration, the ostentatious divinations of the argument under different heads, and the thousand proofs and logical distinctions, with whatever else is contained in the dry precepts of Hermagoras and Polydorus, were in that rude period received with universal applause. To finish the picture, if your ancient orator could glean a little from commonplaces of philosophy and interweave a few shreds, patches with the thread of his discourse, he was extolled to the very skies. Nor can this be matter of wonder. The maxims of the schools had not been divulged. They came with an air of novelty, even among the orators themselves. There were but few who had any tincture of philosophy, nor had they learned the rules of art from the teachers of eloquence. In the present age, the tenets of philosophy and the precepts of rhetoric are no longer secret. The lowest of our popular assemblies are now, I will not say fully instructed, but certainly acquainted with the elements of literature. The orator, by consequence, finds himself obliged to seek new avenues and new graces to embellish his discourse, that he may not offend fastidious ears, especially before a tribunal where the judge is no longer bound by precedent, but determines according to his will and pleasure, not as formerly observing the measure of time allowed to the advocate, but talking upon himself to prescribe the limits. Nor is this all. The judge at present will not condescend to wait till the orator, in his own way, opens his case, but of his own authority reminds him of the point in question, and, if he wanders, calls him back from the digression, not without a hint that the court wishes to just do my time. What did I say? 24:45 plus 8. 9. 51:45. Who at this time would bear to hear an advocate introducing himself with a tedious preface about the infirmities of his constitution? Yet that is the threadbare exordium of Convivius. We have 5 books against Verres. Who can endure that vast redundance? Who can listen to those endless arguments upon points of form and cavilling exceptions, which we find in the orations of the same celebrated advocates from Marcus Tullius, alias Casina. Our modern judges are able to anticipate the argument. Their quickness goes before the speaker, if not struck with the vivacity of his manner, the elegance of his sentiment, and the glowing colors of his descriptions. They soon grow weary of the flat and insipid discourse. Even in the lowest class of life, there is now a relish for rich and splendid ornament. Their taste requires the gay, the florid, and the brilliant. The unpolished style of antiquity would now succeed as ill at the bar as the modern actor who should attempt to copy the deportment of Roscius or Ambivius Turpio. Even the young men who are preparing for their career of eloquence, and for that purpose attend the forum and the tribunals of justice, have now a nice discriminating taste. They expect to have their imaginations pleased. They wish to carry home some brilliant illustration, some splendid passage that deserves to be remembered. What has struck their fancy they communicate to each other, and in their letters the glittering thought, given with sententious brevity, the poetical allusion to the enlivened the discourse, and the dazzling imagery, are sure to be transmitted to their respective colonies and provinces. The ornaments of poetic diction are now required, not indeed copied from rude obsolete style of Accius and Pausanias, but embellished with the graces of Horace, Virgil, and Lucian. The public judgment has raised the demand for harmonious speech periods, and in compliance with the taste of the age, our orders grow every day more polished and adorned. Let it not be said that what we gain in refinement we lose in strength. Are the temples raised by our modern architects of a weaker structure because they are not formed with shapeless stones, but with the magnificence of polished marble and decorations of the richest gilding? What did I say? 5145? Messiah. Okay. This is how to ask, lead, and listen. How to lead versus speak. So this is speaking about the poetic way of speech that had gone away from the very blunt and straightforward, but exhaustive in detail speech of the era they are describing. Inferior, but is also suggesting that the poetics are in some way corrupting to the eloquence, which is a fascinating concept since eloquence is is again suggested in the same piece that eloquence is an evolving characteristic. Eloquence is something that changes over time to suit the times and the wants of the people. So the overly poetic captures attention, and this gets shared to the provinces, gets shared around more, and that attention, all press is good press type thing. You want the dramatic, you want to make things very dramatic for this speaking to the people and to entertain people. And the judges cut through and push because they don't want the drawn out, exhaustive, very technical, dry, at least if I'm understanding correctly, blunt way of speaking. Like blunt, it's probably good, but they'd gotten to the point where a whole afternoon could be spent exhausting and exaggerating and expanding the character. And I see that with some of these older works. The influence of what is referred there is still, in many ways, they're not getting to the point very quick. And fair enough. I mean, even my phone just buzzed in my pocket. Even modern characters are often modern writers, modern or speakers, just teachers. They drag that out. Oof. Modern teachers definitely drag things out to the point that you can get the same from 2 weeks to 2 months of class, depending on the quality of your teacher, as you would get out of half an hour of reading the textbook. It's dismal, the effort they've gone to poeticize and waste time. And if a judge notices that you're attempting to waste time, they don't like it. In the eloquent times, poetic, so you have to be more poetic, capture attention, but still get to your point. So the eloquence and is about the elegance, making a fine, refined point but not in a expedient fashion and a dramatic enough fashion to gain attention. And the drama is where the corruption starts to seep in. So if you want to lead people, you got to learn to ask questions. You can't dramatize things too much. Yes, you express yourself clearly, succinctly, quickly, but don't express yourself like, don't have the melt. I've seen it a few times, and I know these people. There are people who have a meltdown about everything. They're just a basket case or a wreck. They're just a wreckage, and it's because they're over poetic, over dramatic in their communication. It's worked for them to some degree, but it's not elegant, and it doesn't suit the point. I can express that I am hungry in a very blunt fashion, or I can I'm hungry, just straight to the point. I'm hungry. Just be like, oh, which is blunt. It's not elegant. It's not quite. Or I could go on about the ravishing nature of how my stomach is wanting to have more. Or I could say I could ask to say, what's a more elegant and eloquent way to put that I'm hungry. The words I'm very blunt. I think I could use some more eloquence, but what eloquence. Tsukunut. Tsukunut is a Siksikakuan word for I'm hungry. And if I was among Siksikakuan, the Blackfoot people, they would get it. They would laugh. It's a reference. It's a reference to an inside cultural thing and other things as well. So it's a bit of, and that's a way to say I'm hungry in a more elegant way. Elegant, I suppose, depending on the group, and it is very dependent on the group. If I'm at the bar, I'll say, "What's good?" I'm expressing that I'm hungry. What's good? Or what do you recommend? There's a more eloquent way of asking for a, can I have a menu? You're implying that you want a menu. You're getting to the point, but that you want something good and tasty. It's not just that you're hungry. You're hungry for something of a quality. You're having more interest into the topic. If I wanted to express I was over something, I wouldn't break down and freak out. I would just call somebody up. Yeah, I'm not doing so well. Tone, express it. You want to ask for things. But the point here is how to ask, lead, and speak. So if you want to lead, you have to succinctly but accurately communicate, and you want to give people your attention. Yes, but you're taught to sit and listen in a classroom, but you want to still ask. You want to know more about what they're saying. Like in school, I developed the habit early on, maybe because I'm high in trait disagreeability, or for some reason, I would always ask questions, and just it's a want. It's people. You're afraid of looking stupid. You are stupid. Assume you're stupid. Assume you're going to look stupid. How are you going to get correct? Just start with that point. Don't just be afraid about. Start with I'm stupid. So if you're talking to somebody, they're telling you something. Think about it. Pay attention and try and grab more interest in a roundabout fashion. If it's getting people, ask them to eat, and then if they want to go have lunch. You don't and that's an elegant way. It's suggesting I'm hungry. You might be hungry. I'm interested and I'm worried about you. And you have to start, and that's how you lead, by asking. You're asking them to join you and together to both go towards a mutual goal. If you have a mutual goal financially or in the market, say you work with